Welcome to the National Ovarian Cancer Coalition's Ask the Experts Facebook Live series. Thank you all for waiting for us. We're sorry we had some technical difficulties, but today's program will be one of a three-part series on clinical trials. My name is Stephanie Craig, and I'm the Health Communication Strategist here at the NOCC, and I am filling in for my colleague and friend, Jennifer McClendon. So before we would begin, I would like to mention that the NOCC has some wonderful clinical trial basics resource videos on our YouTube channel, which we will be adding into the chat. So you can feel free to watch that at any time. We do a wonderful job explaining clinical trials in depth, and we think you might find it really helpful. On today's program, we're going to briefly cover the basics of clinical trials, but primarily we will focus on how to find a clinical trial. We all know how difficult it can be to locate and search for a clinical trial. And additionally, we may not know what information we need before starting our search. That is where our expert, Nanette Nier-Shoulson, will help us with today. And welcome, Nanette. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to participate today.
Thank you for being here. So just a little bit about Nanette. Nanette is a research nurse specialist at Monterey Cancer Center, Northwell Health in Lake Success, New York. She currently works with the gynecology team, where her role includes screening, consenting, treating, and monitoring study participants in sponsored, federally funded, and investigator-initiated clinical trials. Additionally, she precepts and mentors other nurses who may be new to oncology or research. Nanette, we are so excited to have you today. I figure we'll just jump in and ask some questions. So the first thing I would love is you could briefly describe for us what clinical trials are and really just why they're so important.
Thank you. So a clinical trial is a research study that is designed to answer questions. Sometimes the questions have to do with how to prevent cancer, such as new screening tests, dietary changes. Sometimes it's new tests, how to diagnose, lab tests, scans, new scans. Some of the studies are related to the treatment of cancer. And when I started out, my specialty was in managing the symptoms of cancer. For instance, we had studies that dealt with how to best control fatigue and nausea, things like that, which is so important because you're treating the cancer, but you also have to help participants in trials with their quality of life. Some trials look at new drugs, some trials look at combinations of medication. It may be the standard medication, how that compares to the new medication. Clinical trials start in a lab, and it goes through several phases, the last being in the human population. And here at Monterey, we do phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 trials. And many of the treatments that people use today are a result of trials that were used in the past. You need to only look in your medicine cabinet at your Tylenol and Motrin and such. Those all started in trials. Going on a trial is voluntary. You would sit down with your doctor and they review a consent form with you, which includes the procedures involved, the time the patient would have to be involved in the trial, how long they're involved in it, any procedures that take place, the drugs that they would be taking, whether it be oral or IV, any side effects or benefits from the trial that they're on. And just know that because it's voluntary, even if you sign a consent form to go on a trial, at any time you can change your mind. And by the same token, when or if the doctor may feel it's not in your best interest, they can remove you from the trial and you can look at other options, whether they be standard care or other clinical trials that we may have available.
Thank you so much for sharing this information. I think a lot of our participants or our viewers may not have even known, especially about the consenting process. And that is so important to make sure that you have the autonomy to start and stop. And also that, your principal investigators are truly looking at, your best interests. So very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, could you talk a little bit about your role as a research nurse specialist and how your role is specifically helpful to patients that may be looking for clinical trials?
Sure. I see my role. I am a liaison between the doctor and the participants. Most times I am their main contact. They know that they can reach me even when they may not be able to reach the doctor because of their patient hours. Nowadays, I even give out my email address to patients because if they can't reach me by phone because I'm up and around seeing other participants, they know they can always reach me by email. Being in a trial, taking a new medication, it may prove to be better than what the standard medication is at the time. And just know that your participation now can help others in the future. So a lot of patients, not every trial has a clear benefit to it. It may be a long-term benefit, but people know if they're going on the trial, it can help others in the future. For instance, think about patients who are worried about daughters and what's going to happen when they get older, and if they should get ovarian cancer or any other kind of cancer, they know that being on the trial now can help their treatment in the future, finding better treatments. And it also, I think, as you kind of mentioned or alluded to before, it gives participants a chance of taking a more active role in the decision making. Usually all options are presented when patients come in to see their doctor. And then there's a discussion back and forth, and it's a mutual decision between the physician and the patient as to what is the best course of action.
That's so wonderful to hear. I love that you especially brought up the conversation between, your healthcare team, like your doctors, and, the whole way to really take an active role in your healthcare. And I think that that's extremely important for all of us to be able to advocate for our health.
Well, I just will also say, when patients are on a research study, sometimes they're seen even more often. So we get to assess them more often. So I don't like to use the word better care, but their care may be more detail oriented. I help to schedule appointments and procedures, and looking at blood work more frequently. We're looking out for patient safety. I also dispense the medications that the patients are getting on a trial if it's an oral medication. Some studies involve surveys to find out how their quality of life is, and I may be the person giving them those surveys to complete. And also I do get several inquiries from people maybe out of state or that are being seen elsewhere about trials we have here. And I would be the one reviewing perhaps their history or treatment to see if they could be eligible to be seen here for one of our trials.
You have such a wide scope of roles and responsibilities. It seems like you are just Wonder Woman when it comes to clinical trial participation.
We have a lot of Wonder Women and Wonder Men here.
Well, speaking of, what you alluded to before and connecting with our doctors, would a patient be the type of person to bring up the topic of clinical trials? Is that technically a standard topic of discussion when you go in to speak about treatment options?
I find that it can happen both ways. Sometimes it's the patient who may have been doing research on their own, who may bring up that topic to the physician. And our physicians here are very knowledgeable in trials, even that we may not be doing here, but they may know of physicians in the surrounding area. And even if it's not a study we're doing here, our doctors can let them know if they could be eligible if they have the potential to be eligible. Most times though, the majority I find it's our doctors here who bring up the trials to the patients. When a patient is coming in looking for a new treatment, whether they've had treatment before in the past or it's the first treatment they're getting, they will discuss all the options with the physicians. Some of them, what we call standard options, medications that are already FDA approved, and some of them being the research study options that we have here.
That's great. Are there certain maybe questions that a patient could ask a doctor when we're talking about clinical trials? Is there anything that they should bring up during their appointments, or do you?
Yeah, so they would start out by asking perhaps what trials are available here, or if they know of other trials in the area.
Mhm.
Does the doctor think they could be eligible to participate in the study? Why is this particular study being done? What medications are involved? How is their safety checked during the course of the study? Who has access to their information when they get enrolled on a study? I mean, we talk about PHI, you get that at all your doctor's offices, protected health information. So who will have access to their information if they go on a study? What might be some side effects of the medication or medications if they go on a study? And what might be the benefits to going on the study? Who is the sponsor running the study? So there's usually pharmacology groups. It could be an investigator-initiated trial, meaning an investigator here has written and started up a study to test a medication or a new way of giving a medication. Or it could be what we all call a cooperative group study, which is more or less government funded, like the National Cancer Institute. And we have a lot of those studies as well. So yeah, they might want to know who's the sponsor. Where would they get treated? So for instance, our institution has other sites. So some of our studies are being run here at my location, and some are being run at our other sites under other physicians within Northwell. So could they get treated here, or would they have to go elsewhere? How long would they be on the study? Would they be on this medication or treatment for a year? Might they be on it for 2 years or longer? Many studies, even when you're done taking the medication, we continue to follow you for years, even just to keep monitoring for your safety, how you're doing, what new treatments might you be going on. So you can be sure you're in good hands actually when you're on a study. What might be the insurance costs? If it's a government sponsored study, it's mainly your insurance company that would cover such costs. But if it's a study run by a pharmacological company, then your insurance might cover some of the costs, but some of the tests and procedures that are only being done because you're on the study and otherwise may not be done, such as an extra blood test or having scans a little bit more often. Those are just 2 examples. Those might be covered by the study sponsor because they wouldn't be done had you not been on the study. Some studies may have just short-term side effects like a headache. Some studies may have some side effects which can last a little longer, so you might want to ask those questions. How else can the study affect their daily life? How often would they be expected to come in to see the doctor or have blood work done? And then what phase is the clinical trial? I think you might have gone into phases perhaps on one of your other, okay, so I won't go into them in depth, but there are 4 phases generally for a clinical trial. And the initial phase is phase 1, usually has smaller amounts of people. And as you go up in the phases, there's larger groups of people in them, assessing for long-term safety and effectiveness. I mean, think about your Tylenol. I just heard a couple of years ago, they were pulling the pediatric Tylenol off the shelf because after years of use, they discovered it wasn't safe. So research is always an ongoing thing.
That's a great point. No, you brought up some wonderful questions. And it's really important, especially if you're so interested in clinical trials and seeing what else is out there. Additionally, just so you all know, we're putting in the chat, NOCC has questions as well on our site of additional questions that you may be able to ask your doctor about clinical trials. So those are available to you as well. But obviously all of Nanette's wonderful questions are available to you here too. So now that we've asked those questions and we are, ready to really figure out what type of, if we want to enroll in a clinical trial, how does one find the appropriate clinical trial for ovarian cancer based on things like eligibility, location, maybe types and stage of ovarian cancer, things of that nature?
Well, that's a very good question. And we mainly use one, or there's one that I mainly tell patients to go to, which is clinicaltrials.gov. I know there are others, and actually I was looking at your site and I saw you have CenterWatch and emergingmed.com. But in looking at those, it looked like they actually pulled some of the information from clinicaltrials.gov. Clinicaltrials.gov is, well, they boast that they are the largest database of privately and publicly funded studies conducted around the world. They say from 209 countries. And if you think that other countries don't call us, we have gotten calls from patients that were willing to come here to be treated in our trials here from out of the country and out of state. So yeah, because they might not have access where they live. And, but then you have to think of other things. If they're going to travel here, where are they going to stay? Because some of these trials are held over months to years. And so you really have to think in the long term.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely clinicaltrials.gov. And I think they're the most up to date as far as listing the studies and keeping up to date with the studies. And when you look on the site, you'll see which studies may have been completed and which ones are still recruiting. And they have a good search page. You can just type in a doctor's name if you already know of a doctor and would like to be on a trial, perhaps that particular doctor is running at their site. Or you can just put up the kind of cancer you're looking for, and it'll give you options. So it has an initial search page, and there's also an advanced search page that you can use, putting in keywords. Don't make it too specific because then they might not come up with as much information. It's better to keep it a little less specific. But if you want to go closer to home, you don't want to travel, there's also a way to filter so that it's within a certain distance range of where you live.
That is wonderful. This sounds like a really great resource and extremely valuable for not just the people in our country, but obviously all over the world. So that's amazing.
Yes.
You mentioned a little bit about some of the difficulty in perhaps getting to a clinical trial or being able to, maybe there's a location barrier. In your experience, have you found any sort of barriers since the pandemic has started as far as clinical trial participation?
Well, initially when COVID first started, there were a lot of barriers and we had to work out a lot of logistics. Patients who only needed a doctor's visit, they were done, via a telephonic type visit. I don't know what other places, what other institutions call them, but yeah, there were a lot of visits, telemedicine visits. We really restricted the amount of patients coming in here, but now that some of the rules, FDA rules have relaxed, patients are coming in for their visits. They do have access to all the trials. They're even allowed to bring a family member with them because during COVID times, when they were coming in for their visits, no one was allowed in with them, which was a little sad.
No.
We didn't have anyone here to hold their hand. But when you're going on a clinical trial, just know that once the trial is discussed with you, feel free to ask your doctor, can I take this consent home and read it at home and discuss it with my family and friends before I make a decision? It gives you a chance to review it more thoroughly and write down any questions that you have. Don't feel pressured. We want you to want to go on the study and feel that it's in your best interest at the time.
That's a great thing to point out. Some of the information on those, on those documents can be a little overwhelming. So it's really nice to hear that you have the option to take it home, to really review it, to digest it, and to be able to make sure that it's the appropriate step for you and really be able to talk through it with your family.
Well, and as a research nurse, sometimes when the doctor walks out of the room, I'm still there with the patient. And if they have any further questions, I'll be there to answer their questions or get the answer if I don't know the answer, because you're right, consent forms are sometimes hard to understand. They try to write them in layman's terms, but still they can be a little complex and confusing. And when people are stressed, sometimes whatever is being said is really like they're not absorbing the information. That's why it is best sometimes to go home and really absorb everything that you've heard at the visit before you make these important decisions. And as a nurse, I'm there for you.
That is amazing. Again, that's why you guys are the best. So now that we've gotten our consent form, we're really ready to rock and roll. Is there specific information when we're on a website like clinicaltrials.gov that we should have for ourselves? So, do we need anything about our diagnosis? Do we need anything about our health history in order to, to be able to search for these things?
Definitely.
Okay.
So every study has eligibility criteria. Even if you could sign a consent form for a study, it doesn't mean that you can automatically go on the study. We have what's called, eligibility criteria that will allow you to go on the study, and other criteria that says you cannot go on the study for a particular reason. So it's important in speaking with someone about a trial, especially these phone calls that I get from time to time. I usually ask, what kind of cancer do they have exactly? Where did the cancer first start? What age? Well, I don't usually ask what age group, but there are pediatric trials as well. We usually just do adult here. So I would ask like the age range of the participant. Are they willing to travel here? Because sometimes that's a problem I have if patients have transportation problems. I have one patient who comes from 2 hours away for her visits because she loves the doctor she's seeing here. She's built a rapport with that physician, and the study is offered here and not closer to her home, but she's willing to travel here for the study. And then some of these questions can only be answered by the patient having access to the information from their pathology report. They can ask for a copy of that or ask for this information from their physician, but it's the cancer cell type, perhaps what size it is and where it's located. Those are things that we would be looking at when we have access to the pathology report. The stage of their cancer, do they have cancer anywhere else in their body? They would know that from CAT scans and such. And have they been treated before? Because part of the eligibility or inclusion criteria for going on a study is if they've had treatment before, what kinds of treatment, how many of those treatments did they get? Did they change to a new treatment after that? Because they'll ask for a certain amount of lines of treatment prior. So we have to look at all that. Oftentimes after a patient signs a consent form, I'll tell them, okay, so you go to have your CAT scan now and your echo. I'm going to look at the results of the blood work that you had today, and we'll do an EKG, and then we will get back to you and let you know if you are eligible based on all that information. And if you're not, the doctor will look at other options for you. We may have another study for you or a standard medication.
That's really wonderful that you're providing a full 365 degree view of that support, especially if they aren't eligible for your trial, being able to provide them with other options or see what else might be available. That's amazing. So that's great. So in the interest of time,
Yes.
I do have a few questions from our
Sure.
audience. So I do want to make sure that I get to you. And just so you all know, please remember, if you do have any questions, that you are more than welcome to place them in the Facebook Live chat, and we are happy to answer. Our first question is, if a patient has more than one type of cancer, does that automatically exclude them from participating in a trial?
Not necessarily. I have had patients who had, say, as an example, breast cancer in the past, but they were already treated and, no longer have that breast cancer. They had a mastectomy or chemo or whatever they had. And oftentimes the study may give you a timeline that says if they're 5 years out and there's no evidence of that prior cancer again, that they could be eligible. Now, that's one side of the coin. There are other studies that may say no prior cancer, but basically it's that they've been treated already and there's no evidence of that cancer presently.
Awesome, thank you. Another question just came in. If I sign up to be contacted for a clinical trial, will they try to bill my insurance?
Not if it's a telephone contact. I speak with people all the time, and the physicians I work with speak with potential participants all the time. It's only if you come in for a visit. That initial visit is not a research visit. That initial visit is a standard of care visit, which would go to the insurance. It's the doctor having a consult with you and perhaps doing a blood work or ordering a scan. So you would be billed for that visit, but not a phone contact.
It's good to know. Thank you. We have another question that just came in. What would exclude a patient from a clinical trial?
Well, that's hard to answer because every trial has different criteria. Let me see. Certain medications that a patient may be on, which would not be good for the patient to be taking with the medication. They might have an allergic reaction. Blood work we look at if they're already too anemic or some of their chemistry is off. Well, if the study medication they're going to be taking can cause those problems and the patient already has a problem, say with anemia, say a patient has anemia and the drug will cause anemia, we don't want to make it worse. We're always looking out for safety. Sometimes hypertension could be an issue. I have one trial that involves taking medication which can cause hypertension. So if patients already have uncontrolled hypertension, then they will not be eligible for the study. However, if they're already on medications to control their hypertension and their blood pressure is good at the time of the screening, then they can go on the study. So those are some of the examples, but every study is an individual study that has its own requirements, and those requirements can be several pages long because, again, we're looking at patient safety first. We don't want to put anybody on the study where they can be endangered because of pre-existing conditions.
I think that that is a wonderful way to end our conversation. And I think it's really the most important is understanding that even though you are participating in clinical trials, your care is first and foremost. So not only are you helping to advance research and support the health and well-being of others, but you're also making sure the people behind the scenes are making sure that you're as healthy and safe as you possibly can be. So I so appreciate where we landed there.
Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. And I love speaking to everyone today. And I hope I answered your questions thoroughly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as a reminder to everyone watching, our Ask the Experts program happens monthly, and we hope to see you next month on Thursday, June 30th. If you haven't done so already, please consider completing our survey, which you can find in the Facebook chat, and let us know if you enjoyed this and other sessions. But thank you all for watching this afternoon, and be well. We'll see you soon.